Hello and welcome to the first video in a series on Chapter 10 of Government in America. This chapter covers interest groups, and this will probably be about 3 videos for this chapter. What are interest groups? First of all, interest groups are organizations that form in order to promote a certain type of policy, a certain type of government action on one issue or a related set of issues. They are, like political parties, an example of a linkage institution, a group or entity that somehow acts as a go-between between the people and the government, so that the people know what the government's doing, the government knows what the people want, the government is able to convey information to the citizens, and the citizens are able to tell the government what they want to do. Now, if interest groups are linkage institutions like political parties, how are they different? The big difference is in their goals. Political parties, their main function, the reason that they exist, is so that they can get their members elected to office and then take control of the government for whatever purposes that they want to. Whereas the interest group's goal is to get a certain set of policies put in place. Now, why does that matter? It matters because a political party might change its opinion or its view on a certain issue if the political party realizes that it needs to do that in order to achieve its goal of getting elected. So, for example, if you look at the Democratic Party over the last 12 years or so, the Democratic Party's position on same-sex marriage rights has changed very significantly since the 2004 presidential election. During that election, the party was officially opposed to same-sex marriage rights, especially at the federal, national level. They were in favor of civil unions, but not quite ready to say that as a party they were in favor of same-sex marriage rights. Whereas by 2012, the Democratic president and vice president were saying that they were in favor of same-sex marriage rights, that they had changed or evolved their opinions, and that they were going to sort of change their position moving forward. Why is that? Because they realized that being in favor of same-sex marriage rights was going to get them more votes than being opposed to it. At the same time, if you look at what's gone on in 2016 in the Republican Party, the Republican Party has a long history of being in favor of free trade agreements, making it easier for companies in different countries to ship goods to each other. But Donald Trump was able to win enough votes and get the nomination for the Republicans for president, in part by saying that he was opposed to a lot of these trade agreements, and the Republican Party has started to shift in that direction. Certainly not completely. There are still a lot of Republicans who are in favor of free trade agreements. But the party was willing to nominate somebody who had a completely different point of view because that's where they felt the voters were. So a political party will make those changes. An interest group is not going to change positions. An interest group is not going to decide that they were in favor of something today, but tomorrow they're not. Now, the interest group might change which parties it supports or which candidates it supports. They don't care who they get elected as long as they get their way on their issue, right? So parties want to get elected interest groups want to get a policy done. So that's really kind of the key way of seeing the difference. Okay, so what are some examples of interest groups? For example, there's the National Rifle Association, which is an interest group that works very hard to try and oppose or limit any type of gun control laws. They want to maximize access to firearms. Then on the other side of that issue, you have groups like Moms Demand Action, which is another interest group that's working in favor of gun control laws. They want to make stronger gun control regulation. So those two interest groups are actually going to be working in opposition to each other. The United States Chamber of Commerce, which is a group that tries to promote business-friendly policies. That's an interest group. The American Federation of Labor Congress of Industrial Organizations, the AFL-CIO, that's an interest group that tries to promote worker-friendly things. So those are two interest groups that are often working in opposition to each other. So those are some examples of interest groups. As we kind of discuss in more detail, we may bring up those examples again. Now, political scientists are not 100% in agreement about how interest groups function and how they influence the government and how they sort of fulfill their role as a linkage institution. So what we're going to go over now are three different theories. These are three different ideas about how interest groups work, and we'll sort of talk about those. Okay, the three ideas are pluralism, elitism, and hyperpluralism. We're going to start talking about pluralism first. Okay, the idea of pluralism says that interest groups are an important link to government because, let's say you have a citizen, one single solitary citizen. There are over 300 million people in the United States. So one person, okay, is not going to have a lot of power to make his or her voice felt in the government. And so there's a power imbalance here. We need some way for the people to get together and make their voice heard. Okay, so the idea of the interest group is that a whole bunch of different people can get together and they form an interest group. They pool their resources, their time, their energy, their money, their expertise. They put that all together. And now the interest group is more powerful, more substantial. It's big enough to get itself heard by the government. So what you have then is this sort of universe of interest groups that focus on all sorts of different issues. And they make it possible for you as someone living in America, whatever your concern is, whatever you want the government to be doing, whatever policy you want to see put into effect, you can find an interest group that's going to help promote that idea. And so there's an interest group for you that will help amplify your voice. And so the government sits surrounded by this large network of interest groups who are all sort of making their opinions known. And like we said before, some of these interest groups are opposed to each other. So there's a little tug of war, push and pull. And by looking at all of these interest groups and by all of these interest groups making their efforts to influence the government, they all sort of keep the government in a equilibrium kind of place where it's not going to go too far in one direction or too far in the opposite direction because of the constant negotiation and give and take of the different interest groups. So that's what pluralism is hoping for. Pluralism is generally positive toward interest groups because they play this role of helping connect the people to each other in pursuit of a goal and then to the government. Okay. Now, the second theory is called elitism. And elitism looks at these groups and says, yeah, there are a lot of groups, but all groups aren't equal. Some groups are better connected and more powerful than other groups. And so those groups are able to pull the government very much in the direction that they want to go. Whereas all of the smaller, less powerful groups, they can say, hey, look at us, we've got an issue, we've got something we care about, but they don't have enough pull, they don't have enough influence to actually get that made. So that's elitism. And people who believe in elitism tend to look and say, the interest groups that have the most influence are the ones with the most money, that are connected to the most money. And those are the interest groups that are connected to the wealthy and to large corporations. And so they are able to skew our system away from what's going to work well. Okay. So those are the first two theories, pluralism and elitism. In the next video, we'll discuss the third theory, hyperpluralism, and we'll also talk about what interest groups actually do in order to try to